Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week we talk about a different topic to do with work and we share ideas and actions so we can all navigate our squiggly careers with that bit more confidence and control.
And if you'd like some extra Squiggly support, then sign up for our weekly newsletter, Squiggly Careers in Action. You'll get all the links to the podcast and the tools that go along with it, as well as some behind-the-scenes pictures of things that we've been up to that week. And there's some extra insights from Sarah. Sarah shares borrowed brilliance, things she's been reading, watching and listening to, and I do a random video. It depends where I am that week, but there are some practical insights in the videos. They're called Helen's How-Tos. So the link to that will be in the show notes, or if you go to our website, amazingif.com, there'll be a probably quite annoying pop-up that will come and you'll be able to sign up there.
We also share if there's any events coming up or Squiggly Career conversations on LinkedIn that you can join. And we do have a few of those coming up in the calendar over the next few months. So if you want to come along, spend some time with some other Squiggly Career learners, they're pretty much all free, or I think some of them are very low cost. So please do get involved if that sounds interesting for you.
What are we talking about in this episode?
The secret skill of noticing.
Ooh.
Which I think we've actually both really enjoyed researching.
Yes,
Noticing's been a really nice topic. So what is it? It means paying attention sometimes to what other people might be missing. I think noticing is very intentional, very thoughtful, and often we are on autopilot, which means we sometimes miss out. We miss out on noticing things that might matter or things that could be useful. And what's interesting is when you look into this idea of noticing, and there's a great guy you can follow here called Rob Walker, who's written a book on noticing. You can subscribe to his Substack. I watched a 50-minute lecture on YouTube on the train that he gave over in the US, a kind of really lovely lecture of kind of meandering where he talks about all sorts of noticing, goes way beyond what we're going to talk about today. So if you really like zooming out, like getting the big picture, that's really good to watch. And one of the things that he talks about is when we notice, it sparks creativity, but beyond that, it's often not so much habit forming, but habit breaking. And that phrase really stuck with me because he said, when we notice things, it forces us to look at the world in a new way. We kind of do new things, we take a different route. It kind of opens our eyes up to different things that perhaps weren't there before. And it's a really good source of learning. So you just learn a lot. You learn a lot about other people, yourself, your environment. And so what we're going to try and do today is take something that I think does feel very kind of thoughtful and reflective. And then we've gone 9 ways to start noticing at work. We're like, right,
let's get into the action.
Let's get to the action. And we have tried to make this really practical. And I think when you start to do this, actually, I think the list could have been longer. I think we stopped at 9.
Well, I think that's a nice thing, isn't it? Like the more intentional you become about noticing, the more you start to notice.
Yeah. I mean, doing this podcast this last week, I was like, right, well, I'm going to notice the bird song. I was getting quite intense about it. One of the things that Rob Walker talks about is like, do you notice the moon? So I've got quite into noticing the moon. And I was like, what's happening to me?
What have you noticed about the moon?
Oh, well, he talks about actually... this does get a bit abstract, but if you notice the moon, like the shape of the moon, is it a crescent moon, is it a full moon, you're connecting to something larger than yourself.
Okay, so perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. So...
I could just see how sceptical you look as I start talking about the moon.
I think there is noticing in Rob Walker's general sense, and then there is this podcast where we're going to get right into like meetings and moments that are relevant at work. But it's nice to have both, the moon and the meetings, I feel like.
So idea 1, notice when time flies by. And my reflection on this was train journeys versus train journeys.
What does this mean?
I know. Like, I've been spending quite a lot of time with Rob Walker. So I was getting more and more conceptual the more I thought about this.
Great.
So train journey 1 is the same as train journey 2, but in one it flies by and in the other it doesn't. And I was like, notice why not? So why does my train journey home sometimes feel really long and laborious? And why do I nearly miss my stop? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting because the time's the same, but actually how it feels, the time feels for me, I noticed it feels very different. And actually what it's made me think about is my slow train journeys where I get bored and I'm a bit like, oh, I just want to be home, is when I'm, like on social media, not really connecting to anything, dipping in and out of things, getting a bit distracted, bit kind of all over the place. The train journeys that fly by for me are when I am reading a book, maybe because I'm researching for a podcast. I've got one task that I want to do. So the other day I wrote our acknowledgements for our next book on the train. I was like, I've got one job to do on this train journey, and it's to write our acknowledgements. And I really care about saying thank you in a really meaningful way. And I nearly missed my stop because I was really into it and I was just writing it. I knew I got headphones in so that it wasn't kind of too noisy and things. And so actually it has made me rethink about what is this train journey for? And sometimes it's for listening to a podcast that I absolutely love that's nothing to do with work. Or sometimes I'll think, have I got a task that lends itself to being done on the train? Because I can't really get my laptop out on the train, so I can't do emails or those kind of things. But I can write one thing or read one thing or create a set of questions or prepare for something that we might be doing. So notice when time flies by.
I like it. It's a lovely question, and I get your train
journey.
versus
train
journey, but I get it.
Got there at the end.
Notice what's not being said in a meeting. That's idea number 2.
I think you're very good at this.
I like this. I feel like it keeps me engaged in meetings. So you can think about notice maybe who's a bit quieter than normal, or notice where sometimes someone might be trying to say something but they're not kind of getting in, or where there's long pauses. I think there's lots if you are not noticing what's not being said, there's lots to look out for. And I think, if someone has dominated the conversation, it's likely that other people have got a perspective, but they've just not had a moment to say it, so then you can invite them in. Or if somebody is normally a bit more vocal and on that particular day they're very quiet, then actually that might not be about anything in the meeting, that might be about something outside. You're like, you would normally have a perspective on this, Sarah, and the fact that you haven't even commented on this copy or creative is weird. I'm noticing that you are not saying what you would normally say. And so I find it personally, it is sort of both a nice thing to do because it means that you're kind of keeping people engaged in a conversation, but also selfishly it keeps me engaged because it gives me another purpose in that meeting.
Idea number 3, notice how an hour without your phone feels. So this is something I've done quite a few times. I mean, your face tells me that it's not the first thing you want to try out, but maybe that's the reason to try it out. Noticing. And I sometimes do this now on holiday. So, sometimes you do need a phone between you as a family, but we probably only need one. So I will often say to my partner, have you got your phone? And he does take his and he never looks at it anyway. So you're like, it's not a problem. Whereas if I take my phone with us when we're going for a walk or onto the beach or whatever, the temptation to just look at it, to check your email or whatever, is so much higher because it's available and it's accessible. So my sort of reaction is the phone goes in the glove box. It's that's where it sort of lives. Yeah. And it lives there for an hour or two. And I think when I've tried it also at work, when we've got things where you do really need deep focus, typically you're writing something, you're really trying to use the best parts of your brain. The quality of my thinking here needs to be high. The thing that I've noticed is that when I come back to my phone, I never feel like I've missed anything. And I think I am training myself to let go of, the dopamine hit that we know comes from messages being needed, FOMO. Because that's a real thing, right? They are designed to be addictive. And I think I've left my phone for longer and longer periods of time. And I do actually think I could exist without it, other than things like Google Maps, where I'm like, how would I get anywhere? I'd have to get the old A to Z out again. Yeah. But I think it was this is almost like a 2-year process for me, where I noticed that an hour without my phone felt really kind of tense and quite anxiety inducing, whereas now I'd feel very relaxed. I think I could not have a phone and I think I'd be fine now. Gosh. I know, your face. Mate, would you like to try an hour?
I'll get a few voices. No, so my reflections are, I've done elements of this, but I think I don't do it very long because I don't like it. But what I have sort of noticed is that whenever I don't have my phone, in the moment, so that whether it's work or the weekend, I'm quite liberated. So if I'm going for a walk with my family without my phone, other than occasionally thinking, I might want to take a photo of the kids. So I'm
or there's a thing you're used to doing.
Yeah. But generally I'm quite liberated, not having a phone, not having this conversation, it means I'm more present. But in the week, when I then go back to it, I feel quite overwhelmed because I'm like, oh my gosh, because there's so many messages, so much stuff. Whereas at the weekend, there's less stuff. And so I have less of that feeling, but I'm sort of copying the same pattern of having my phone constantly at the weekend because it's become a habit. So I think I could easily have have it less, put it in the glove box for a whole day at the weekend.
Yeah.
It's just the habitual thing. But I have noticed in the moment I like it, after the moment I find it, the amount to catch up on, I found a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, so you'd almost need to, you'd kind of have to design that into your day.
Yeah.
So if you're like,
Checkpoints.
I'm not going to have it for an hour,
Yeah.
then you'd almost be like, but I need to give myself the 15 minutes to catch up and check in and make sure everything's okay. Which is probably
still be healthier than being like, check.
Yeah, and we even have that, right? Like we say to each other sometimes, should we do a quick phone check? And we both sort of agree to be like, check, catch up, sorted. Because then we know we need to go back to kind of being present to whatever we're doing next.
So number 4, notice what's on your manager's worry list. What questions do they ask? What topics do they keep coming back to? It's interesting because we don't have managers now. We just sort of manage each other. But I could still, I sort of intuitively get what's on your worry list, but if I actually tuned into it, which is I think is what noticing is.
Yes.
And if I've spent a week noticing what was on your worry list, I think I would, like, at the end of it, I would be like, these 3 things. Whereas now I'd be like, I think it's probably this. I feel like I'd be guessing a little bit more. Whereas, like missing dates and deadlines, I know that that's on your worry list because we talked about it. Like it's a thing I've noticed today. But it's so useful because then I could think, well, how can I be helpful? Or what could I do differently so that that's less of a worry for you? And that would probably, not that we probably need to build a better relationship, but if you were my actual manager and I had a bit more distance from you, it probably would help me to build a better relationship with you because I'd spent time thinking about your work and your worries, and then how can I work in a way that's more helpful for you.
I think here you can start to notice repetition, topics that people keep talking about. What do people almost seem overly obsessed or interested in? And I think if you really notice this with your manager, it's actually where sometimes you can understand why there might be a disconnect between what you're trying to do and what they care about, because those things sometimes are at odds. You're thinking, well, this really matters to me because that's the project or the piece of work I'm trying to do. But then they keep talking to me about this other thing. And that could come across as, oh, they don't care. Or they're not listening. But actually it's like, well, that's because that's on their worry list.
That's dominating.
Yeah, and it's dominating. And so actually if you can sort of tune in and tap into that and actually talk to them about it, almost the likelihood of them then actually also be able to come back around then to maybe what you also need probably increases. Number 5, you can tell I've been doing this one a bit. Notice 5 things about your commute. So these are details that you might currently miss out on. When was the last time you looked out of the window? I did try this one this week, listen to people's conversations. So I was actually sitting waiting.
What was the best thing you heard?
I just had loads of people talking about work.
Okay.
It was a lunchtime.
Okay.
So when I say commute, I was sort of kind of having something to eat and then going to a train. But I was just like listening to often friends or maybe work colleagues, I'm guessing. And everyone was just sort of in London, so people are sitting quite close to each other. And people were talking about, oh, this has changed, or this is hard, or their managers, or whatever was going on, which I found fascinating. I was like, oh, this is like a live focus group on careers and what's going on in people's world. But I think the point here, the reason people encourage you to do this is this does turn autopilot off. And it's how you turn autopilot into attention. And so you don't need to do this all the time. I think sometimes autopilot is useful because we know what to do, it's comfortable and it's easy. And there are other times where we're not on autopilot. So your commute can actually be a bit relaxing because of it. But if you we're like, oh, but on Monday I'm going to try and notice 5 things. I did notice the other day, I tried this. I was like, right, I'm going to look out the window. I never really look out the window. And I was like, oh, there's cows. And I was like, oh, it felt quite rural. And I was thinking, oh, I don't think I live that far out of London. But turns out there are cows on my way home on my commute. Or, turn your podcast off for a bit.
Yeah.
Just like look around. And the whole thing is like, this is tuning into the sounds, what you can see, what you can hear, all of your senses. I don't think you need to do this all the time. The other classic one, someone said this to us, didn't they, once in a workshop, turn right rather than left.
Yes. Yeah.
If you have a lunch break or if you go for a walk at lunch or something, we always eat the same thing. You go to the same cafe, and I've definitely been very guilty of this because it's easy and you know how it works. It's like, oh yeah, but what if you walked the opposite direction?
Yeah.
What would you find? And I think this is harder and it's more uncomfortable, but I think it kind of gets your brain zapping in different ways.
It's weirdly brave. I was just thinking, I'm commuting home later. I wonder if I sit on the train and I just notice
Yeah.
I aim to notice. And so you don't in advance, you're not saying I'm going to notice a cow. You're just
No.
saying I'm going to sort of mentally notice 5 interesting things.
Do you know one other thing I noticed?
What do you notice?
80% of the people who got off the train with me were men. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. Is that because of the time that I'm coming home? Is that because the way the world works, it's still hard for women who probably have primary caring responsibilities to also commute at this time? Made me ask some very philosophical questions, Helen.
I feel like this is exactly the skill that you need.
I was like, I'm really enjoying it. I am never going to get anything done again because I'm too busy noticing.
Okay. Well, if you want to balance towards your noticing, perhaps the next one might be helpful.
Yeah.
Notice what never seems to get done because you're
Everything,
spending
'cause I'm
so much time
noticing.
noticing. It's so meta. So there's quite a lot to learn from this. Like I think the easiest way I would do this is I write a list in my so I have kind of like my diary. And every day I kind of like write my actions in the diary, and at the end of the week I carry over something that hasn't got done, so it's on the list for the next week. And I think I would notice what keeps getting carried over is basically the work that never gets done. And then I think you can kind of go, well, why is it? Because I notice sometimes that I don't do things because in my head it's going to take a long time, and then when I actually do it, it's like a 2-minute task. But I sort of make assumptions about how long things are going to take, and then you think like, well, maybe like things like doing like time blocking or task blocking, that would probably help me, because I always put it off until I've got some time. But I think notice what never gets done. How would you notice what never gets done?
Because you keep talking about it. I actually think I do know what.
Oh, that's annoying. Yeah.
And
it makes me think about things that I've not done.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about things that I've not done?
Yeah, obviously. I would say not you. We haven't got done. I think I know this all the time. Like I hold this in my head because I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't notice small things. I don't mind about small things that don't get done. That I think because like everyone has a system for that, right? Like you use your diary. I have like flags in my inbox, and you go, oh, I need to. That you kind of work your way through that. I think here I notice the big things that don't get done that I think are important.
Yeah.
And then I think what it makes me question is, are they important? So maybe I think they're important, but maybe you don't think they're important, or maybe the team doesn't think they're important. Maybe they are important, but there's another blocker that we need to remove. So are we a bottleneck to something getting done? I mean, that's a yes quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
How could we approach something differently? Are we getting stuck in a need to get it right rather than get it done? So, progress over perfection when good enough is great. Or do you need to not do something else to create the space to do this thing because it is really important?
It's quite a nice team conversation. When I say a nice team conversation,
I would enjoy this.
I think it also gives a team a chance to maybe vent, like a bit of like, this keeps not getting, like it's quite frustrating that this doesn't get done, and then you can go into back to your point, you go, well, why isn't it getting done? What would need to change for it to get done? Let's prioritize the things that we're noticing aren't getting done, and collectively resolve it. Nice conversation.
This was actually probably my favourite one because I liked not the kind of confrontation's the wrong word, but I think I liked the accountability that comes with this. So rather than blaming or beating yourself up or just accepting, none of which I like the idea of any of those things, you sort of go, well, let's just notice it and use the noticing as to actually inspire action, because I liked the fact I felt you'd get to better action because of it. Number 7, notice what your inner monologue sounds like. Yeah, I don't find this one that difficult either, I don't think.
What does your
inner monologue sound like? I think probably what's useful here is your inner monologue working for you or against you? So is it your gremlin in charge? So is it one of your confidence gremlins telling you, well, you've not done that thing because you're not good enough, because you're not smart enough, because you're fearing failure, and what if it's not as good as it could be? And I can notice sometimes with those things that we haven't done, some of my gremlins definitely are like tapping away a little bit. Or is it more, you kind of supporting yourself, like you being your own best friend? I do think when I reflected on this one, I was like, I think your inner monologue can change from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day. I think everyone's monologue goes up and down like during the day. My question for myself was like, and then how do you feel by the end of a week? Like what are you telling yourself about your working week? Are you saying that was a productive week that I feel proud of? Are you saying I've had a really good impact this week? Or are you finishing a week going, look at all the things I've not done. And again, you know, kind of finishing a week with optimism, we know makes a difference to then, like, you know, both your kind of confidence, but also your capability. So actually, the day that I was writing this, I was like, oh, my inner monologue was telling me that my work is so kind of curious and interesting and intriguing today. I'm like learning so much. I'm spending time with so many different people. And I was having a real kind of curious day. But then also within 24 hours, my inner monologue was saying to me, I wish I just had 15 minutes because I'd got such a
Busy,
full on day. And and also I'm somebody who likes to have the kind of time to think. But then, you know, almost by kind of listening into it and tuning into it, I think you can also choose to change the channel. Like I do know that. And actually, rather than wishing I had 15 minutes and getting a bit frustrated by that, I think I then just looked and I was like, well, okay, it's okay that I haven't, because I'll look what I've got here, or I will have it there. And then I was a bit better again.
Yeah. I guess you could just write down at the end of the day, couldn't you? Like write down what am I sort of saying to myself in a non-judgmental way, just like write down those kind of insights that are in your head, and at the end of the week you can kind of reflect on, now how does that make me feel like about my week? I would need to see it, you know.
I was thinking actually journaling. This might
that
work
would probably
for people.
I think you could be a bit more in your, you can process
definitely
more in your head, wherreas I think I would need to get it out of my head onto a piece of paper, and then I need to like look at the words and be like, what's going on? I think that would work for me. Actually, listened to a really interesting podcast with Adam Grant and Ethan Cross, who's the author of Chatter, who's also been on our podcast, and you got to talk to him, didn't you? But it was quite to Ethan Cross, and basically saying he has no inner monologue. He has no chatter. He's quite no chatter. And so Ethan Cross is like, well, dude, is that true?
Surely everybody has.
Well, yeah, he was very adamant. No chatter. He was saying like his wife will read stories and imagine the characters of the people, like to their children, imagine the characters, and see. He's like, no, they're just words on a page. Like it was like maybe scientific. I don't know, but it was quite an interesting conversation. Ethan Cross actually I thought was brilliant in it, because you could just be a bit like, it's like someone saying to us,
anything to work with.
Yeah, like someone says, I don't believe in squiggly careers, and you're like, great, I've got to talk to you for an hour
about something you
clearly don't believe in. And he wasn't, Adam Grant wasn't trying to be difficult. It was just, you know, potentially challenging conversation for somebody who's, you know, so expert in this area. It was quite interesting to listen to from that perspective of someone not getting defensive and being curious from someone who's kind of being challenged. Worth a listen. So the 8th one is to notice what you don't know. And this is actually inspired by someone called Richard Feynman, who talked about having like a kind of a don't know notebook. And so going through your days and weeks, and rather than, I don't know, letting your, I guess, ego or kind of know-it-all mode drive how you're showing up, which is like, I know this about career development and I know this about chatter or whatever. Actually going, well, what don't I know? What don't I know about Ethan Cross's work? What don't I know about what careers look like in other countries? And being very, very conscious of that and sort of capturing that and using it maybe for some sort of curiosity later in the day. And if you have like a don't know list or a don't know notebook, I think it's quite an interesting starting point for, is there a moment in your day where you could dive into your don't know notebook and think, well, do you know what, I'm curious. I actually do this in a very less of a list. I do it with words. And so I will often be reading, I quite like finding a word that I don't know. I love it. I like because I'm often like, I'll be reading the papers and I'll like read the FT at the weekend, and I'll be going through it and I think, sometimes I'm a bit embarrassed. I'm like, I probably should know what that word means. But now, rather than be embarrassed about it, I've just gone, oh well, it's just,
I'll be curious.
I'll be curious about it, and I look it up, and I have it in my phone. I just keep now like the words that I found that I didn't know in my phone as like a little, I don't know, like a little personal encyclopedia of wisdom that's just for me. So I quite like doing it with words. Is mine.
I wonder whether, I know in workshops where we ask people, what do you want to learn this year? So in 2025. Obviously, the stock standard answer at the moment is AI. And that's literally all you get. You get AI. I actually wonder if it might be more useful for people to kind of notice what they don't know about AI, because AI is so vast and so big. Almost if you wrote down some questions you want to answer about AI, it gives some clarity to what you don't know. So I think sometimes it's quite good for a big topic where it can feel a bit overwhelming with where to start, or if you just think, oh, I just don't know, I don't know anything, or there's so much I don't know.
I don't know what tools to use, I don't know what prompts are good or whatever.
But actually by almost breaking it down then into your kind of, here is a list of things I don't know about this theme or this topic, you can then also look at them and go, okay, well then who could help me turn that from a don't know to a no? Or what could I experiment with? Or where might I start? Or what could I read, watch, or listen to? Like I've listened to a few quite sort of full-on AI podcasts from people clearly like, in the technology industry who are in it day in, day out, just to see what happens.
What to you?
No, to the conversation.
Oh.
I'm like, what happens in that kind of a conversation?
Okay.
I think because I just couldn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
I sometimes read some of these things about AI and I'll be like, I don't really understand like what people are talking about. So I was like, I'm just going to almost like dive in the deep end to something I wouldn't normally listening to.
Yeah.
And they basically, like they talk about like tech updates. So they'll be like, oh, well, this week there's 4.3 version of this thing has come out. And I'm like, I wonder what version 1 was. I've not even heard of it. And it's like at 4.3. But actually, even just like listening to the conversation, you're a bit more in that world.
Yeah.
And you definitely, know more than you knew 40 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And that's all you're trying to do is you're trying to move what you know further forward, even if you were starting from scratch.
And I think, again, back to that, I think it just stops you being embarrassed. I would often think, notice what you don't know. Acronyms is a good one. You know, when you just all take an acronym.
I always ask that in a workshop now.
Yeah, you're like,
almost out of principle.
I don't actually know what that means. So,
or I guess them to make a point. I'll say, someone did have one actually the other day, and I guessed it wrong. But actually, it really made people appreciate. They were like, oh, sorry, that's a really internal thing. And I was like, oh, what does that stand for? I was like, this, and this. And they were like, no. It was something really different. So I think that's a really good thing to do. And last but not least, number 9, notice other people's strengths in action. I think this can be a brilliant opportunity to tell people when you see them at their best. And I think if you notice people's strengths in action, often you can take for granted either that they know, they must know that they're good at this, so I don't need to say anything, or you might stop noticing because you take it for granted. So I think and that's a slightly different thing. And I was reflecting on that and thinking, if I think about even people in our team, I'm like, I take for granted that they are brilliant at ... And then I was like, when was the last time I told them that? And then I'll probably think, they probably know. I'm like, but do they? And even if they do, the worst case scenario is that I am reinforcing to them the positive impact they're having. And also I want them to keep using that strength and use it more.
What might it sound like? So you've noticed someone's strength standing out in a situation, you see them in action, and you're going to give them some strengths-based feedback. What would that sound like?
I think I wouldn't do it in person for a start. I'd probably just do it over Teams, really fast, really informal. I would probably spot the situation. So I would say, in that meeting we were in together today, I noticed that the questions that you asked really helped to create clarity for what we need to do next.
Nice.
And if you hadn't have done that, there's a risk we could have all come away a bit unsure. Or what was the consequence of you not using that strength? As simple as that, a sentence, maybe 2, or I might use brilliant because we often share that in our workshops. I might say, that presentation was brilliant because your stories are what cut through lots of kind of data for people to understand, but it's the stories that I think people remember, and they felt really personal, and they really created a sense of connection between what you said and kind of what I heard. So I don't know, something like that. I'm making nice ones.
It's a really nice. I think noticing someone's strengths in action is a really nice thing you can do for your colleagues. I think it's a valuable thing.
But I think it's one of those where it's like it sounds easy, but then easily forgotten.
And it's different to praise. It's rather than going, you're great today. I think strengths in action means it's more specific. So we have gone through 9 ways that you can start noticing at work. And what we will do is put those all in the pod sheet. So that is a 1-page summary, which brings together everything we talk about in the podcast in something that you can download and take action with. You can get that from our website, amazingif.com, or it's always sent out in the weekly newsletter, Squiggly Careers in Action. Links for all of those things will be in the show notes.
But that's everything for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm back with you again soon. Bye for now.